Good evening and welcome to the West Orange Board of Education Public Board Meeting on Monday, October 16th, 2023. I would like to thank all of you here in person and those watching from home for joining us tonight. Ms. Flowers, would you please take the roll call?
Good evening, everyone. Roll call, please. Mr. Ifker.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Here.
Ms. Tunnicliff. Ms. Huerta.
Here.
And Mr. Rock.
Here.
Thank you. Notice of meeting. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests are discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, a written notice was sent from the Office of the Secretary of the Board on September 6, 2023. That said notice was sent by regular mail to the West Orange Township Clerk and the editors of the West Orange Chronicle and by email to the Star Ledger. That said notice was posted in the lobby of the Administration Building of the Board of Education and posted on the district website. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcasted on local TV and the district's website at a future date. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Flowers. In consideration of the closed and public meeting of September 18th, 2023, do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Huerta. Are there any comments? Hearing none, Ms. Flowers, please take the roll call.
Mr. Ifker.
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Vice President Huerta.
Yes.
President Rock.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, good evening to our student liaisons, Leila Abonaja and Kanai James. Would the two of you please share your report with us?
Okay, so our first event was Blue Against Bullying. Students, including many sports teams and art students, wore blue for bullying prevention on October 2nd, 2023, to raise awareness and lead the way to stand up for bullying. The homecoming dance took place on October 5th in the Tarnoff cafeteria. Students dressed up according to the theme of an enchanted garden. They had a great time dancing and taking photos with their friends. The 10th annual Marching Band Invitational occurred on October 7th, 2023, where bands from different schools in New Jersey came to compete with each other with West Orange High School as their hosts. And for Hispanic Heritage Month on October 12th, students showed pride by wearing clothes to represent their Hispanic heritage and culture. Shout out to the Latin Culture Club for creating this event and showing love to Hispanic students.
On October 12th, the West Orange volleyball team showed love to senior members for senior night. We wanted to extend a big thank you to staff and members for creating a great night for our seniors. Pink Out football game was on Friday the 10th. No, sorry. It was on Friday, October 10th to 14th. During this football game, homecoming royalty was crowned Leila Abonaja and Julia Taylor, along with royalty Sammy Santiago and Terry Lubin. The West Orange football team won 43-0. Pink was worn in solidarity for breast cancer awareness. West Orange Dewey Festival this year in 2023. This event is on Sunday, October 29th from 2 to 5 p.m. It is a West Orange High School event in the Turnoff cafeteria. There will be music performances, food, and kid activities. Come check it out. This year's fall play is coming up in November on the 3rd to the 4th at 7 p.m. The production of All in the Timing, which is a series of one-act plays by Davis Ives. The one acts are comedians and dramedies that focus on language, wordplay, and perspectives on life. Tickets are $15 and can be purchased in advance online in schools, on the school website, or cash at the door. Thank you.
And good. Thank you for that. And congrats again, Leila, for being crowned homecoming royalty. I thought you were going to read that part of the report. Congratulate yourself. So, all right, Mr. Moore, it is now time for your report. Would you please share the superintendent's report with us?
Thank you, President Rock. Before I begin, I would like to ask if perhaps everyone will join me for a moment of silence. West Orange lost one of our administrators, our Director of Human Resources, and our facilitator of Diversity, Equity, Access, and Inclusion. Our colleague, Dr. Tamika Pollins, passed away unexpectedly last Wednesday. I ask that you'll join me for just a moment of silence in honor of Dr. Tamika Pollins. Thank you. Tonight, it is my pleasure to acknowledge an achievement made by our Roosevelt Middle School student who's here with us this evening, along with the Roosevelt administration. I saw her mom, and I hope siblings. If you would be so kind to join us here at the microphone. Principal Lionel Hush and Assistant Principal Olivia Bentantes to introduce and recognize our student, Miss Maya Weiss.
Good evening, everyone. Member of the Junior Olympic Championship 4x4 and 4x100 meter team. Top 3 finisher in the 200 meter New York Armory Youth Championship. Straight A student in honors classes. Most recently, Right On Sports 2023 All-Star student. These accomplishments, as great as they may be, do not define Maya. They merely paint a picture of who she is. To truly know Maya is to know that she is a kind individual who cares deeply for her family and for her friends. She is a hard worker who strives for success. And as you can see, she has already experienced a great amount of it. She's a positive young woman who loves to learn and does not shy away from challenges. Maya is the epitome of a rising star that breeds pride from the adults in her life. She continues to represent her family, her school community, and her hometown of West Orange extremely well. And we are all so very proud of her and honored to be a part of her journey. I present to you the 2023 Right On Sports All-Star student, Miss Maya Weiss.
Maya, may we take a picture with you? Thank you. Right? Does he have your PowerPoint? There is, okay. Okay. Our next presenter will be Dr. Richard Grip, who will be presenting a demographic study for our town, for our district. I ask that the board please sit in the front row.
Good evening, everybody. It's always so nice to come back. Oh. It's been a few years since I've been here. Last time I was in the auditorium. This is much more intimate of a setting. So tonight, we'll be talking about the results of a demographic study that was performed for your school district. We'll just get to some general info before we get into that. Our firm has been doing this type of work for, say, the last 25 years. And this is the only kind of work that we do. It's actually called school demography. There's only about 100 of us in the country. So when I look at those two students over there, if you're math people, talk to me later, because we need people to do this kind of stuff. And no one's ever heard of this kind of career. So I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But we've done about 200 of these type of studies for school districts in the metropolitan area. And we are the demographic consultant for the New York City Public Schools. We do all their demographics, all their enrollment projections. And as you've probably been looking at the news with some of the things going on with the migrant crisis, they have their hands full over there. My background, ironically, I grew up not too far up the road in Secaucus. I went to Rutgers University, became a civil engineer, and realized that wasn't for me. So I went back to school, got my master's in science ed, and I taught for Del Barton, which is an all-boys school in Morristown area, before embarking at the public school level, Bridgewater, Raritan, in Somerset County, teaching physics and statistics. And while I was there, I was trying to do my dissertation in a program called Ed Stats and Measurement, which is behind me. And my superintendent at the time said to do this dissertation on projecting enrollments, because there was so little people that could do it. And it was the best advice I ever got. So hopefully I can pay it forward to someone else for students out there. I still love to publish this information, writing journal articles and peer-reviewed journals. And I'm testifying a lot, unfortunately, as an expert witness in ALJ hearings when school districts want to divorce from each other in the state. So tonight, we'll talk about the presentation. If we could just hold all the questions to the end, I would appreciate it. This is based on a study that was provided to your district in November of 2022. So it's almost already a year old. So some of the data that we're talking about will be referencing school years that are not exactly 23, 24. So I just want to be very clear about that. So when we did our study, we were projecting enrollments for a 5-year period from the 22-23 school year through 26-27. And you might ask, well, why don't we do a 10-year projection or something longer? You have to then start projecting kids who haven't been born yet, which is a very difficult thing to do. We do it for New York City, but for small communities such as yours, it's not really practical. But we look at other things. If you peel back the layers of the onion, we look at your community population trends, fertility rates, age structure, birth rates, things like that. We look at your historical enrollments over time for the last 10 years, not only by district-wide totals, but by elementary, middle, and high, and by school. Also by race and poverty status, which is also very interesting. We computed the number of birth counts that happened in each one of the elementary attendance areas. And why do we do that? Well, we're trying to figure out how many kids would then be kindergarten students 5 years later from those births in those elementary attendance areas. We contact the municipality to find out about new housing starts to see how that could impact your projections. We also computed student yields of that's really number of children per housing unit for different housing types in the township, such as detached single family, apartments, townhouses, to help project how many kids to expect out of new housing developments. Finally, we compared your building capacities to current and projected enrollments to see if you have surpluses in seating or shortages of seating. So this is just looking at a little graph of West Orange's population over time. Everything to the left of that vertical line is from the census from 1940 to 2020. You can see that most of the biggest growth that you had here was in the 1950s. So as of 2020, you're just shy of 49,000 people. Everything to the right of that vertical line is from a third-party agency called the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. And it was based off, their projections are based off 2010 data. So that's old, on the right-hand side of that graph. So my thinking is those numbers are going to go up a little bit higher because the 2020 count has already passed the 2030 projection. So who are you as a community? Very racially diverse. 39% white, 29% roughly Black African-American, about 20% Hispanic. Those are the three largest races. There are others, of course, but I'm just giving you the three largest. You have increasing Black and Hispanic populations in the township and decreasing white population from the 2010 census. A little bit higher of a median age compared to that of the state, about 4 years older. Almost 31% of people here are foreign born, which is a little bit higher than that of the state. Haiti and Jamaica are the largest sources of people from foreign-born sources. Very educated community. Almost half of the population has a bachelor's degree or higher, which is higher than that of the state. Your income's higher than that of the state, almost $20,000 higher. 18,000 housing units, which is a lot. About 2/3 are single-family attached, which would be a townhouse or detached. 32% roughly of the homes are rent or occupied, where that's pretty close to the state average. And the median value of an owner-occupied unit is just under $400,000, which is higher than just slightly higher than that of the state. So here are the locations of all the schools. We have a GIS analyst on site, which will basically provide data from databases like Excel and then bring it into map form. So here's all the locations of the schools. Here's what your elementary attendance areas are based upon what you provided us, which is if you live on this street, this is where you go to school. In the very center of the township, you see it's gray. That's an area, that's the Essex County Country Club, the golf club, which doesn't have an attendance boundary. So you can see that some of the attendance zones are not exactly contiguous. So you might have part of a different elementary attendance boundary across the township. And that happens over time to balance out enrollments. Here's your middle school attendance areas. For Roosevelt and Liberty. Edison, of course, everyone goes there as a sixth grader. So let's talk about your enrollments. Again, when we had this data, the last year of data that we had historically was the 21-22 school year, which is the second year of the pandemic. And every district, including yours, probably just did it today, maybe, uploaded your enrollment for 23-24 to the state through NJ Smart. It's usually around the 15th of October. So we always look at enrollment the same day or date, and it's always around October 15th. So for the 21-22 school year, your October 15th enrollment was 6556.5. There's a shared time student in there somewhere. So your enrollments in the district decline through the 16-17 school year before they begin to stabilize. So if you look at the endpoints, we looked at a 10-year period from 12-13 school year to 21-22, there was a decline of about 279 students over that decade. And we do use something called the cohort survival ratio method to project enrollments 5 years out. I'll talk about that in a moment. But this is your enrollments. You can see, if you look from the left to the right, there is a decline through 16-17, and then things kind of stabilize. This is the most important graph of the night. If you're going to stay awake for one slide, this is the one you want to stay awake for. This is your historical enrollments by grade configuration over time, elementary, middle, and high. So the elementary is the one that I want you to focus on. That's the one up top in blue. So what you can see for that is that enrollments have been generally declining historically in elementary population. If you compare the two endpoints, it's a decline of about 322 students. The reason I tell you to focus on that, if you just picture this, if you're declining at the elementary population, keeping everything else equal in the school district, those smaller cohorts have to move through the district, which is going to put downward pressure, declining enrollment at the middle and high school eventually in time. So for what we see for middle and high, The middle school enrollment actually increased through 16-17 before it reversed trends and stabilized, and it actually has gained about 43 students in the last decade. The high school enrollment's kind of interesting. It's the one in green. Compare the endpoints. It's exactly the same enrollment, really, 10 years apart. Really no change in the high school enrollment, although of course it has changed up and down during that time period. So how do you project enrollments? We use something called the cohort survival ratio method, and it's really a fairly simple methodology I can explain to you in about 2 minutes or less. It's when you take a look at the number of students in a particular grade and compare it to the number of students in the following year. So I'll give you a simple example. If you have 100 first grade students in 2020, and they advance to second grade the next year, and there's only 95 of them, the survival rate, if you want to call it that, or progression rate, is 95 over 100, or 0.95. And there's 13 possible progressions, birth to kindergarten, all the way through 11 through 12. So if the ratios are above 1, you're gaining students due to inward migration. If it's below 1, like in my little simple example, you're losing students. So in your particular district, when we looked at your ratios, and we usually take an average over 4 or 5 years to avoid anomalies, 9 of the 13 averages were above 1, indicating that you have inward migration of students coming into the district. 2 of the ratios that were below 1 were at the elementary level. And in the 21-22 year, which again is the second year of the pandemic, you had 4 survival ratios that were the lowest over the last decade. And the reason we look at that is because we want to exclude those values going forward, because we don't want that to negatively affect your projections. So the simple thing here is we take an average of these ratios of these 13, and we compute this average and multiply it times the most current enrollment that we have, and assume that the ratios will hold constant through the projection period, and that gets us your projections. So we do use BERTs to project kindergartens five years later. We looked at the data from 2007 to 20. Basically, since 2010, BERTs have been fairly stable. But if you look at the endpoints, again, you had 481 BERTs in 2020. Compare that to 2007, which is 642. So that's 161 fewer BERTs. So the question is, how has that affected your kindergarten enrollment? I don't show it on this slide, but I show it in one coming up, that in the same time frame, you had a decline of 76 kindergarten students, which again will lower your counts going forward through the system. We looked at the BERTs by elementary attendance area as well. I'll show you that in a moment. So here's your BERTs over time. There's that stability that we are looking at in the middle of the graph, but it definitely did decline. So here's the key chart that I was just mentioning, that this compares number of BERTs that are to mothers in West Orange and how many kindergarten children come in the district 5 years later. And you can see the capture rate or survival rate, if you divide kindergartners by BERTs, is always less than 1, which is indicating to me that not everyone here is coming, not everyone that was born here is coming to school here. They may be going to private or parochial schools. They might be homeschooled. They might be moving out of town before the age of 5, but consistently below 1. But take a look at the endpoints, 492 kindergarten students. In fact, even had 541 the year after. And in the most current year, we had 416. That's a lot of loss in terms of kindergarten students because of that declining birth rate. So we looked at your BERTs by attendance area for that same time period. If we break it out by the 7 elementary attendance zones, the Redwood areas had the most number of BERTs over this time period, while the Hazel attendance areas had the fewest. And if we look at the endpoints again and take the difference, the last row there is showing everything in red, which is indicating that each elementary attendance area has had fewer BERTs in 2020 as compared to 2007. The unknown column on the right is just saying that we know that a woman lives in West Orange and had a birth, but we just don't know her address, so we can't assign it to an attendance area. So just looking at the BERTs by census block, if we combine them over time, the most number of BERTs are in the northern part of the township, up in the Redwood area and a little bit in the Kelly attendance area. So we look at your age sex diagram. It's all starting to come together maybe for you. This is just showing the number of males and females plotted back to back by age cohorts, say 45 to 49, 50 to 54, so on and so forth. So the males are on the left, they're in orange, and in green are the females. So in 2010, The biggest groups for males was 50 to 54, and it was 45 to 49 for females. If we advance it to 2020, now we didn't have 2020 census data at the time. The largest groups for males was the 10 to 14 age group down the lower left there, which would be your 5th to 9th graders. And the largest for the females was 50 to 54. So if we look at the change over that time period for each age group in blue, the biggest gainers was the 70 to 74 group. So you're getting older as a community, which of course is not going to help the school system grow because of course you have more people of ages that aren't having kids. And the biggest decliners, if you look, are down in the lower age groups in red up there, the under 5 population for males and the 5 to 9 population for females. So one thing the district asked to take a look at was your enrollments by race. And this is just showing a bar graph of the race over time from the 16-17 year to the 21-22 year. It's a little bit different than what I told you for the township just earlier tonight. The Hispanic population is the largest population in the school district. It just became that in the 21-22 year, surpassing Black African Americans. The white population has been declining slightly, as well as the Black population, while the Hispanic population has been increasing. This just shows you the enrollments by race by school. Just what's interesting here, I highlighted in blue the majority race in each school. So depending upon where you are, it's predominantly either the Hispanic population or the Black African American population that's the largest race, except for Gregory, which is the largest is white over there. So then we looked at your economically disadvantaged student population. Interestingly enough, about 43% of the student body was economically disadvantaged in the 16-17 school year. It's increased to 46.6% in 21-22. There's a gain of 3.4 percentage points or 194 students. But when we look at the economically disadvantaged students for each school, you can see for the elementary schools, which is really from Washington all the way to the left, it's really not that different. So you don't have one school at 5% economically disadvantaged, another one at 75%. They're fairly uniform across the board. So like I said before, we do contact the township to see if there's any new housing developments that could impact the projections. All these developments are what we call multifamily developments. They're apartments that are either market rate, which means anyone can rent it, or affordable, which means that you have to qualify for renting it if you have a certain salary or income. Most of these are approved or either under construction. The very last one there we did not include at the time. It was something called the Highlands Tract, which has been in litigation for a number of years, and it was going to have 60 single family homes. I'm not really sure if that ever got out of litigation or not, but roughly over 630 units are planned in the township. So we do have to try to compute how many students could come out of those houses, and we join your student address database with the property database of West Orange. And up above here, you'll see for 1 to 4 family homes, the yield is 0.687 children per housing unit. So most of your children live in a detached single family home or duplex, something like that. Very few children live in townhouses. 0.119 is very low. 0.161 for apartments is also very low. So if we actually use some of these multipliers here, it's actually, I'm simplifying this, but we were projecting about 119 children from all the developments from the prior slides. This is just showing you a very detailed, if you really want to get into the weeds, look at our report. We actually, for each development, figured out how many units are in it and how many children from your database are in each one of the developments. We also did it for apartments, but I didn't bother to show it here because it's so long. But since we did this study 5 or 6 years ago, the very far right-hand side shows the student yields when we did it 5 years ago and currently. And basically, if you look at the very bottom corner, right, you can see that the yields have not changed that much for townhouses in the township. And that's pretty common. Apartments, it was the same thing, really hadn't changed much. Historically, you have had a lot of construction here in the township. You can see in the Mount Pleasant area, you had 350 homes built in the last 5 or so years. Most of that is due to, I wrote it down, but I can't find it. I might come back to that. So you had 350 units in the Mount Pleasant area and 100 units in the Hazel area, from Harvard Printing 2 and Edison Lofts. That was the one I was looking for in Mount Pleasant. So quite a bit of housing units. Home sales, you can see a lot of sales peaking at 2005, then declining due to the housing market banking crisis in 2008 to 2012, then going back up through to the 19 year. We didn't have 20 or 21 at that point. So this is what you want to hear, the projections. What are we projecting? For the next 5 years, we did two sets of projections. A baseline set, which assumes that none of the housing that I just showed you comes online or it doesn't come online in the next 5 years. Just strip out the housing, this is what you get. The other one is an adjusted set of projections, which assumes that all the housing gets built. So the baseline projection, you're projecting 6,319 students in 26-27. That would be a decline of about 238 students. If we looked at the adjusted projections, it's still projecting a decline, but a little less of 176 students. So no matter which methodology we looked at, we're still looking at decline in enrollments for the next 5 years. And this is what I was trying to talk about earlier tonight, that if you have declining elementary enrollments, this is showing you what it's going to be by grade configuration in the future: elementary, middle, and high for both baseline and adjusted. The middle and the high school are projected to have the biggest declines as these smaller elementary cohorts move through the system. If you also remember, I talked about stabilization in the birth rates. That stabilization is projecting us to have a more stable, constant kindergarten count going forward. That's why if you look at the elementary grades, they're actually projected to be fairly stable for the next 5 years. So if you really want to have a crystal ball, you can probably say to yourself, well, does that mean somewhere in the future, maybe 5-10 years from now, we might have stable enrollment at the middle and high school level? And I would say yes. Okay, but that's way beyond the 5 years that we're talking about, but you can see my point. The last thing we did is we compared your capacities of each building to the current enrollment and then took the difference. If the value is blue, it means you have surplus seating. If it's red, you have a shortage of seating. So currently you really don't have many buildings with shortages of seating. That would be St. Cloud and Liberty Middle School, but those shortages are very, very minute. We see bigger problems when you have 100 students of a shortfall. 5 years from now, what does that look like? You can see that most of the buildings still have a surplus. Again, a shortage at St. Cloud and Mount Pleasant, just barely over capacity. And by the way, those capacities are based upon how you're currently using the building. If you decide to have more small group instruction, for instance, gifted and talented, special ed, then you're going to have smaller capacities in the building because you cannot have as many students in those rooms. So capacity is a fluid number. It's not a fixed number. So last thing tonight is COVID. Thankfully, I think it's sort of over. I mean, I know people are still getting it, of course, but how did it affect enrollments? This slide shows that around the country, there were some big declines in enrollment due to COVID. And the big problem was we really didn't know as demographers. For instance, now I live in Vermont. I don't live in New Jersey. I've been out of the state for about 20 years. And we had a lot of people from this area, the metropolitan area, move up toward where I live, either into their second home or just bought a new home. And then we weren't sure, well, are they going to stay up here or are they going to go back? A lot of it has to do with remote work, which is still, some people are completely remote, some people are hybrid. And if that completely goes back where everyone has to go into the office, that's going to change things again. But for those people who can work remotely, we're seeing people stay in the places like where I live. This is just showing the population change in the country from the beginning of the pandemic to July 2021. And red is the biggest decliners of population and green is the biggest gainers. So the Rocky Mountain states gained a lot of people. The central heartland of the country lost a lot. And you may say, what about New Jersey? Well, New Jersey, during that same time period, the Turnpike Corridor, straight up and down the gut, right from Bergen down to Mercer County, was the biggest decliners. In fact, Hudson County, where I'm from, was the biggest decliner. The biggest gainer in population was Ocean County. And if you're thinking like me, for the people who own second homes on, say, Long Beach Island, that's where they went. So it's a shift of population that was allowed through this pandemic. And a lot of people from the urban core of New Jersey left. So the summary tonight, your enrollments are projected to decline throughout the projection period. The enrollment decline is not projected to be uniform across the 3 grade configurations. The elementary counts are projected to be fairly stable, but the middle and higher projected to decline as these smaller existing elementary cohorts move through the system. So with that, I would entertain questions from the board. Sure.
One moment to turn the microphones back on for you guys. Reference? Sure. And not be able to.
Thank you, Dr. Grip. So we'll kind of start this way. If there are questions, move down. Anything, Mr. Okay, Mr. Stevenson.
Just for the community's understanding, and when you're engaged to do these demographic studies, what are the 3 major reasons why your firm is engaged to do this work?
Well, the number one reason is usually a facilities reason. So we don't have enough space. So what's it going to look like in 5 years so we can plan accordingly? Or maybe we're contracting. Do we need to close a school? Something along those lines. So usually the first thing is something related to facilities. Another reason is sometimes imbalance. Sometimes you have particular schools that have a lot of students and then others that do not. And then we have to do something called redistricting, which is a term a lot of people don't like to hear. Parents don't like to have their kids go to a different elementary school, but that's another reason. And also sometimes it's imbalance, whether it be racially or economically disadvantaged students, to have a uniform amount roughly across the school district. Those are the main reasons.
And lastly, your findings are obviously data driven and take into account the data you were able to get to inform the study. Does your report offer any recommendations to the superintendent or to the board?
No, it's more or less, here's the objective data, because I'm not really certain what you're planning on doing with it. Every school district, it's different. So usually there's subcommittees and then they study it, and then, there's recommendations that they'll make to the board itself. But no, I was just asked to do a demographic study looking at the objective findings.
Thank you, Dr. Grip.
You're welcome.
That's President Huerta.
Thank you. I do have a question. So this study was done 5 years ago, so we did not take into account our new pre-K program and our partnerships with that and how that attracts or might attract newer, younger families.
Well, we did account for the pre-K because I believe you got a grant, didn't you? A PIA grant, yeah. So we did account for some of that in the projections, but we usually look at that in terms of just pre-K, not to say necessarily that it'll translate straight across the board. We look at the birth to kindergarten as the continual comparison to figure out the elementary projections. But yeah, we did look at that as well, the pre-K.
Okay. And what about how it attracts families, or is that you
Yeah.
can't really project?
Yeah, that's a qualitative thing that was very subjective, and no, we don't, that would be more survey driven, and no, we did not look at that.
Okay, thank you.
So is the take home mess, I found that very interesting. Is the take home message here that space is not an issue for us and will not be for the next 5 years?
That's a pretty good assessment of the report. Yes, because when you look at that one of the last tables with all that blue, That's kind of unusual to have. I mean, you don't have a lot of surplus and nor do you have a lot of shortages. The shortages is very something, you can easily change the capacity of a building by saying, look, instead of having 20 children per general ed classroom, the Board of Ed is going to raise it to 22. That just raises the capacity up by 2 students per classroom. If you have 25 classrooms, you just raise the building's capacity by 50 students. So that's not really an issue. It's when we see things in the hundreds, that's when I get nervous and start to tell you to look into other options. But yeah, I would say that you're in good shape for the next 5 years.
Great.
So
Thank you.
in the report, you mentioned an evaluation of the previous study and kind of the the amount of error or lack
Correct.
of error. You didn't mention it tonight, but just for the board members' edification, can you tell about roughly how accurate was the previous study that you did back in 16-17?
I'm actually happy in this case because the error rates were very low. The error, I don't have exact numbers, but they usually range between 1 to 1.5% per year for the pre-K to 12 population. Then we broke it down by elementary, middle, and high. And the reason I say that I'm happy with that is 2 reasons. First of all, as a demographer, we shoot for a 1% error rate per year. So if we're doing a 5-year projection, if we're within 5% at the end of the 5-year projection period, we're good. So when we're getting error rates less than 1.5% for your district for the whole 4 or 5-year period, that's phenomenal. But the other problem that happened during this whole time frame was something called a pandemic. And in some districts that we work with, it really, really negatively affected the district's enrollment and then our projections, of course, because there was no way we could possibly assume a pandemic was going to happen and then people left and we had these very large error rates. So that did not happen here in West Orange, but our error rates here in this particular case were very good.
And my other questions about the student yield for apartment buildings, because that's a conversation that often happens in the community. So I just wanted to kind of hone in on that for a second and make sure that we all understand that and the people living at home can hear some numbers here. So I think you said it was about 0.16, give or take, was the expected yield. Somewhere between 0.1 and 0.2. We'll just round it off,
Yes,
right? That's not accurate.
that's about right.
So, and when you look at your 2 projections between the one without any housing growth and the one with housing growth, they both show small declines in enrollment, and the additional housing that's been built or being built isn't changing that. Is that correct?
Correct. And the reason for that is because one thing that we sometimes make a mistake with as lay people is looking at the number of units that are being built and not the type of units being built. So if in this particular case, we're talking about 633 multifamily homes, if you had 633 detached single family homes, this would be a completely different story, because a detached single family home can generate 4 to 5 times more children than an apartment. Most of the things that are being built here are market rate 1 and 2 bedroom units, which just do not have as many students in them. So the type and the bedroom distribution really are very meaningful. So it's not just the number.
So if someone were to say that a new apartment building was going to yield 1 student per apartment, you would say that's not
That's
likely.
That's ludicrous.
Your words now. Mike,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Thank you. And then if because there are some other housing developments that are in consideration going before the planning board and in conversation. So if we were to kind of take the assumption that it's between 0.1 and 0.2 students yielded per unit, would that be a fair assumption for other housing units that are apartments, like
So-
high rise 5-floor apartments?
So that's a good question. So what I gave you was the overall for all different types of apartments. When we start getting a little bit more refined in our analysis for the projections, we look at the type of development that is being built compared to what we have as comps in the apartment database. We try to use something that's comparable in terms of bedroom distribution. If it's a high rise, we try to use another high rise. So we have to go back and see in your historical set what matches closely to what's going forward.
All right, I think that does it for me. So thank you again, Dr. Grip.
No, you're welcome.
To President Rock's question. So is there any factor within the analysis, whether it be apartments or given that you indicate that the community is on the older side, if I'm articulating that correctly, is there something that could swing that pendulum in the extreme opposite direction? I think is where Mr. Rock's questions were leading, to where something completely upends this analysis?
Mhm. Good question. There are two main things in my book. Number one, it would be new housing starts that are not something we reported in the study and of the different type, like detached single-family homes. That'd be number one. The other thing that could really upend things is a migration change of some sort. I'm using New York City as an example because they gained 13,000 migrant students in the past year. That's an anomaly for sure. We could not expect that, these people would be getting bussed up into New York City. Now, if something like that happened to West Orange, of course, that could definitely impact your enrollments as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
All right, have a good evening.
Good evening.
And finally, President Rock, since our last meeting, we've had two HIV investigations throughout the district. We reviewed and summarized the investigation reports. We had one confirmed and one not confirmed. I concur with these findings that our anti-bullying specialist has presented. And that concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Next, do we have any committee reports from the board?
Thank you. I want to speak for a moment about the visit that I had today at Washington Elementary. I was pleased to be joined by Ms. Huerta. When I first decided to run, and then when I was honored to be elected, one of the things that I wanted to do was visit all of the schools, which seems like a reasonable thing for a Board of Ed member. And so this was our first one, and I appreciate Mr. Rock for helping to facilitate that. And there's a lot of good to report. It's a very old school, but it's a very beautiful, clean, well-run school. We were only there for about an hour, but your first impressions are that wonderful teachers, totally enthusiastic, kids doing what they're supposed to be doing. And on the other hand, a recognition that it's a tough environment. There are a lot of kids on public assistance for lunch. There are a lot of kids for whom English is not their first language. And these are all challenges that they bring to school every day. And it's up to the administrators and the teachers and all of us to try to make some improvements, get the test scores up, more importantly, get the skill level up. So this was just the first visit, and we discussed it already in our closed session before coming out here. And I'm looking forward to following up further in the very near future.
Thank you, Mr. Ripper. Anything, Mr. Stevenson?
No, just make a comment. As it's in the agenda, there's a second reading and adoption of policy number 2421, the career and technical education, which is the public attachment to.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you for those committee or those reports. I would like to share my board president's report with all of you now and also highlight some of the work going on at Washington Elementary School. Washington school faculty, staff, students, and PTA participated in the run for the Stop for Nikhil 5K run, which was, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Washington School won the $2,000 prize given by the Nikhil Badlani Foundation for the school that raised the most money for that fundraiser. The Nikhil Badlani Foundation will unveil safety murals at Washington School on October 19th. That's coming up later this week. And Mrs. Badlani has invited guests to come for the unveiling. Washington School was awarded a grant from the State Department of Education for fruits and vegetables. Students receive fruits on Tuesday and vegetables on Thursday. Students at Washington participated in all grade levels for the Week of Respect. All students made a leaf for our kindness tree, which is on a bulletin board in the hall. For Spanish Heritage Month, we asked one of our students to share a quote during morning announcements, and an assembly program was held where Hispanic dancers performed for our students. The next item on our agenda is the second reading, Mr. Stevenson mentioned, and adoption of policy number 2421, career and technical education. Policy has been reviewed by administration and presented this evening for its second reading and adoption. May I have a motion to approve policy 2421?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice President Huerta. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. Ms. Flowers, please take the roll call.
Mr. Ifker,
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson,
Yes.
Vice President Huerta,
Yes.
President Rock.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we will have questions from the public on agenda items only. Any community member who would like to make comments or ask questions, please come to the podium at this time. Please state your name and home address for the record and then begin your comments. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any members of the public here in the audience tonight who wish to make a public comment?
Yes. Hi, good evening. My name is Mel Julie Valdez. I live on Elm Street. So I have a few things I want to discuss. First, I want to know why there isn't any type of public comment that's allowed either via Zoom or via phone, given that the presentation that you just showed was being broadcasted through YouTube via Zoom. And I know that Mr. Rock, you said that that's not possible, but I don't even see the submission to do it electronically like you had it before. And I feel that, you know, the town councils are able to do public comment via Zoom. So why isn't the Board of Education looking at that just so we can give more access? Given that your demographic, it's parents. I have my daughter here because it's 7:33 in the evening. It's a prime time for parents, and it's very hard for us to come to these meetings if there's no, Zoom access for us to make these comments and be involved in what's going on. So, if we're the prime demographic, we should be included, and access should, it should be more accessible. And there's other reasons why it should be more accessible for people who have disabilities and can't make it to the high school, for people who live down the hill where I live and would have to take a bus to make it up here. So, I think you need to start thinking about access and making these meetings more accessible to all. The second thing is the demographic study. So he left and the public wasn't able to ask him questions. I do have questions because I am concerned that at Washington School, the classroom size is becoming large. When my daughter started in kindergarten, her classroom size was about 15. Right now, it's at 22 because a new student just was added to her classroom, and there's only 3 fourth grade classrooms, whereas when she started in kindergarten, there were 4 kindergarten classes. I think classroom size is very important. It's something smaller classroom size and more one-on-one, or, for the teacher to dedicate time to the students, that's very critical. So if we're not looking at that, especially because the Betty Magdalena preschool program is at Washington and is taking up classroom space, we need to look at that because, his study made it seem like, oh, we're going to be fine for the next 5 years. But it seems like the reality is, did he go into the schools and actually look at the classroom size and look at the classrooms and look at the space? Because I didn't hear that when everything was, statistics. Statistics are great, but you also have to go in and actually view what's going on. The other thing that, hold on. And yes, it would have been great to be able to ask him more questions about, some of the stuff that he was talking about. I would like to know, the report that he completed, how is that accessible to the public? Do I have to submit an Oprah? And also the data that he used to come up with these numbers, is that accessible to the public so others can also analyze it? Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public comment? Public comment on agenda items only.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yes.
So
Yeah, we'll have a second
I'll be
public
pausing
comment
that.
later if
Gotcha.
it's general.
Thank you.
Thank
That was my first question.
Gotcha. Thank you. So just briefly in response to the statement that was made, if the presentation we heard today, that there is a written document that goes with that. The board has had the chance to read that before this presentation, but it will be posted on our website and publicly available to the public after tonight's meeting. Now that it's been formally presented, if you read that and you have questions about that, feel free to reach out through the superintendent or myself, and we can either try to answer those questions or perhaps follow up with the demographer himself. His task was not to look at class size per se. His task was to look at district demographics, but the district will be analyzing as part of our budget process, which we do every year, what class sizes are in each building, where staffing levels are in each building, where we can and cannot make adjustments to that. I can't predict what will come out of that, but that's always a part of the budget discussion, is how many teachers we can afford to put in each school, which directly relates to how many students are in each of those classes. So that's something that the administration will be looking at over the next few months, but not something that will come out of this demographic study. In regards to Zoom public comment, At this point, the board is not prepared to make that switch. We do again welcome, well, anyone who comes in person. We do live stream for people to watch at home. In the case of tonight's report, there was no action being taken on it. Right, the most important reason for you to be at the podium to speak directly to us would be if there is an action item on the agenda. But the agenda is always posted prior to the weekend so the public can read that. We do all read our emails on a daily basis. And trust me when I say that when emails come in, we pay attention. You may not always realize that on the other end of it. But anytime we get, I'll say, one email, that will spark discussion amongst us to talk about what's going on and what is it that people care about. And we will either follow up with that person directly or have conversations with the administration about the issue. So again, we always welcome feedback, but at this point, we are not planning to have a live Zoom public comment during meetings. Thank you. If no one else has public comment on agenda items, we will move on to our resolutions. So may I have a motion to approve the curriculum and instruction items B1 through B6?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ifker. Is there any discussion?
We do personnel, I'm sorry. Start,
Yes. That's my bad. Sorry.
okay. Thank you.
I lost my place on my rewind. Take that back. All right. May I have a motion to approve the personnel items A1 through A5?
So I
So moved.
rescind my,
Oh, yeah,
your
motion.
my motion, and I now will.
Make a motion
Put forth a motion.
to
to the
approve.
correct,
He's moving it now.
resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, who moved to approve personnel items A1 through A5. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice President Huerta. I want to congratulate the following retirees: James Galeotto, a phys ed and health teacher at Edison Middle School for his 21 years of service. Roseanne Porchesi, a fourth grade teacher at Hazel Elementary for her 20 years of service. Kevin Murphy, a paraprofessional here at the high school for his 15 years of service. And finally, last but not least, Suzanne White, an administrative assistant at Central Office for her 22.5 years of service. Thank you all for your service to the West Orange students and our school community. Best wishes to you on behalf of the Board of Ed, and welcome to the club where every day is Saturday. Is there any other discussion on personnel? All right, hearing none, Ms. Flowers, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Ifker?
Here.
Mr. Stevenson?
Yes.
Vice President Huerta?
Yes.
President Rock?
Yes. All right, now, may I have a motion to approve the curriculum and instruction items B1 through B6?
So moved.
Thank you, Vice President Huerta. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Flowers, please take the roll call.
Mr. Ifker?
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson?
Yes.
Vice President Huerta?
Yes.
President Rock?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, may I have a motion to approve the finance items C, special services items A 1 through 4, and business office items B 1 through 6?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Vice President Huerta. Is there any discussion?
just to thank the donors. Oh, we'd just like to thank the donors for their donations. We have 6 55-inch LED Samsung TVs given donated by Matthew. I'm sorry if I pronounced this name incorrectly. Katelia. And then we also have the $10,000 that's going to the Youth Advisory Board, and that's coming from NJ Manufacturers Insurance Company. Then we also have a donation from Dick's Sporting Goods that's going to the West Orange High School Athletics in the amount of $1,000. So thank you to all our donors because we definitely appreciate the donations and welcome them on.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? All right, Ms. Flowers, please take the roll.
Mr. Ifker?
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson?
Yes.
Vice President Huerta?
Yes.
President Rock?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, finally, may I have a motion to approve reports, items D1 through 2?
So move, yes, so moved.
Thank you, Vice President Huerta. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Flowers, please take the roll.
Mr. Ifker?
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson?
Yes.
Vice President Huerta?
Yes.
President Rock?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you have a question? Okay. All right. Thank you very much to all my board colleagues for that work. And that brings us back to petitions and hearings of citizens, this time on any agenda or non-agenda items. You want to? Sure. Sorry, we'll, so everyone wants to say something first, and then we will open it up to public comment from.
I'll be brief. First of all, on a personal level, last Friday, my son had a medical emergency. Thank God he's doing well now. I just wanted to take this opportunity to publicly thank the West Orange Fire Department. They were prompt, they were professional, calm, organized, everything you want. So I just want to give them a shout out. We have great police, we have great fire, and we shouldn't take it for granted. So this has been, excuse me, this has been a tough week, tougher for some than others. To begin with, before we came out here, we had an internal conversation about a statement that went out from Mr. Moore. And while it's not required that his statements go through the entire board, I suggested that perhaps in the future, statements on sensitive subject matter should, and especially if you have someone on the board who might know a bit about it, might have a little sensitivity to it, and a little bit of knowledge in terms of the community we're speaking to, that in the future, we change that around a bit. And that was met favorably, I think. And those are issues that we'll take care of internally. A word about Mr. Moore. I speak with him regularly. And this week I had the opportunity to meet with him and the Deputy Mayor, Larry Ryan, who's here with us. And I'm not, I don't know how to say this otherwise than just say it, is that Mr. Moore is a special person. Whenever something happens, he reflexively goes into protective mode for his students. Anything to protect them from bullying, from racism, from anti-Semitism, he does it all. And we talk and we meet on a regular basis. And I can't speak for my whole community. I can only speak for the people that live on Lakeview Drive with me, but he is a friend of our community, that's for sure. This is, I never thought in a million years that when I ran for Board of Ed, or was fortunate enough to be elected, that I would be expected or want to speak about something going on the other end of the world. But it does feel like something should be said. To begin with, there's a local flavor to this, which is painful. The kid who used to work in my backyard, I think you handed him his diploma last year, and now he's in Israel for a year. The young man up the street came home for the Jewish holidays, and now he's in a tank near Lebanon. There are so many military families in this town. Someone told me that their son's a Marine and they can't get a hold of him, and they're concerned that he's been deployed somewhere dangerous. So this is very difficult. The emotions are high. But we have to keep our eyes on the ball. As educators, I've educated a lot of kids in my career, and teachers, superintendents, everyone who's here tonight is here because we care about the kids and that about the children. And that means a proper education, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But it's also okay to point out good versus evil. How you do that is different for everybody, what grade they're in, their level of ability to understand. But, you know, someone asked me right after the news came from Israel, aren't you going to pray for all the innocent victims of a war? And I said, I absolutely do, and I will, and I know everyone in my community does. As soon as a war starts, this was a massacre. This was, let's find the Jews and let's kill the Jews. It shouldn't be that hard for us to make a distinction between the babies and the baby killers, the rapist and the woman who's raped and paraded around town. I don't want to have a political discussion. I'm happy to talk to anybody. I'm just here to say that it's okay to point out there are good guys and there are evil guys. We all think that we're such good people that, you know, if I had been around or if you had been around, you know, years ago, we would have spoken, we would have stood up and said something. Maybe we would have, maybe we wouldn't have. If I had been lucky enough to be living in the United States in the 30s and 40s, when Jewish civilization was almost wiped out, I hope I would have said something, but I don't know. But I'm saying something now. This was a massacre. My heart is with the people who suffered. And it's okay to point out to our children that there are good guys and there are evil guys, and we stand with the good guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ipker. I appreciate you sharing it. At this point, we'll open up the floor to public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please approach the podium at this time. State your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Aaron Twersky. I live at 72 Sullivan Drive in West Orange. I've lived here for 14 years and I have 2 children in the district here. I have to say that the schools here are unbelievable. Unbelievable. When my youngest started at Kelly, I felt like we hit the Princeton of elementary schools. So thank you. And before I begin, Mr. Moore, everything that you just heard tonight is true. Thank you for making this high school the rock that it is. There are people that talk about you all over town. Before my junior started high school, and you're missed here in this building, but we thank you for doing the job that you're doing today. I've never done this before. I've served on boards, so I apologize if I speak over just a couple of minutes beyond my address. You know, I think by way of introduction, it's just going to be a little bit helpful. I'm a man that really sees everyone the same. I see everything because I see the difference of color, but I also know that we are all made anatomically the same. And I also know that everyone deserves to be treated with mutual respect. What I'm about to speak about is a sensitive topic, and I really do it respectfully. But as you just mentioned, that when my grandkids when my grandkids ask me what I did, I don't want to say nothing. I want to say I came, I spoke, and I said this wasn't okay. So if you don't mind, my 3 minutes will start now. I'm a very concerned parent and resident of West Orange. I have a child that is a junior in West Orange High School. Given his experience at school last week, he was duly upset. We took the time to discuss why he was so upset, and we agreed that I would contact Principal Guerrero and Superintendent Moore to express our mutual disappointment in the school and its leadership. Thank you for this opportunity to additionally address the Board of Education and to explain the situation. As a result of the terrorist attacks in Israel, and the unspeakable advocacy throughout America for killing Jews, my child, a junior here at the school, attended the Israeli Culture Club. The acronym is ICC for short. He went to the meeting to get support, give support, and to find out how he can help raise awareness against terrorism and anti-Semitism. At the ICC meeting, the students asked to use a megaphone at lunch to gain support and raise awareness. As a great model of efficiency, they said, and they referenced, the Black Student Union regularly uses a megaphone at lunch, asking students to join their club and meeting them wherever they are to meet to raise awareness, and that the ICC wanted to do the same. The students at the Israeli Cultural Club were told no. When the ICC students asked why, They were told that we need to be sensitive to the other side. The students were flabbergasted and insulted by this reply. The other side, you ask? The other side is pure terrorism. To be clear, the other side is not Palestine. It is Hamas, a terrorist organization whose mission is to murder civilians. Amongst the murdered, raped, beheaded babies, and innocent civilians of all ages taken hostage on October 7th, 29 Americans were killed, and at least 14 Americans were abducted by terrorists. What happened in Israel on 10/7 is no different than what happened in America on 9/11. Both countries were brutally attacked by terrorists. The only other side to terrorism is humanity. How can an educator in the United States defend terrorism? How can any group of students that want to speak out against unbiased hatred be silenced? Hasn't history taught us anything? Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people." In this instance, silencing the students of the ICC is anti-Semitism. With respect, Mr. Moore. As for your letter, I thank you for doing your best to provide a safe and nurturing space for all students to learn, grow, and flourish throughout West Orange, truly. I also thank you for being ready with counseling services and staff for those students that need support. You've done it before, and I know you guys are doing it here again. It's really an amazing place here throughout West Orange. It's clear, Mr. Moore, that your letter was genuine and came from your heart. At the same time, Mr. Moore, you missed an essential opportunity to stand up against terrorism. Rather, your first paragraph transitioned from quote unquote attacks by Hamas to quote geopolitical complexities, end quote. The absence of denouncing terrorism combined with a sentiment of neutrality is unforgiving. In the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Lastly, I asked my child and other West Orange High School students if anyone employed by the school educated the students about the terrorist attacks in Israel and the potential global ramifications if the war escalates. I was told no. This is yet another missed opportunity, an educational moment. As a community and over time, we have band together on the side of justice and humanity. People here know my track record of where I stand, where it matters. Where is the moral equivalency? This time should be no different. This is neither political nor geopolitical. This is about terrorism and pure hatred. Now is the time to stand up and not be silenced. I urge you and West Orange High School to join the ICC and all students that want to reject terrorism and speak up against anti-Semitism, as well as all forms of bigotry and violence. Now is the time to show your true colors. Please reissue a thoughtful letter to the entire West Orange community that denounces terrorism and rejects any form of anti-Semitism. Additionally, let it be known that you will ensure that the ICC and all students have a voice to do the same. These students should be praised, not silenced. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, you can introduce yourself and when you're
Eli
ready.
Brickman. I had a speech written out. This gentleman over here probably made the best speech any of us could have ever made. I am not a student here. I am the sibling of a student here. And I think it is important that we condemn terrorism where it is. Hamas is a terrorist organization. 1,300 Jewish lives were lost in Israel from a terrorist attack. Not a war, no provocation, just a pure terrorism attack. I had a whole thing written out. I can't repeat any better than him. So I would like to take my next 2 minutes for a couple minutes of silence to honor those that were lost.
Hello, I'm Nava Brickman, and I'm a freshman at West Orange High School and a member of the Israeli Culture Club. I would like Mr. Moore to publicly denounce in no uncertain terms that West Orange is against terror. Mr. Moore's recent letter regarding Hamas's barbaric, inhumane attack was weak. Many students and West Orange families are looking to you as our leader, and your words count. Please don't let this civilian atrocity be taught as a simple geopolitical issue. I urge you to rewrite your letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience for public comment this evening? Thank you very much. Mr. Moore's, or do the board members have anything they want to say?
I want you to first understand, of course, without uncertainty, I understand that the attack by Hamas, which I stated in the first letter, perhaps I could have, and I will take your constructive criticism to heart. I could have probably restated that and used a more of an adjective or understand, but I did put in the letter that it may be outside of my scope to fully understand not terrorism, but what I was addressing was the difficulty that was going on within the school and with the students and making sure that people spoke with respect. But I definitely, absolutely condemn any terroristic acts such as what happened to the people of Israel, for sure. I know that it was an atrocity, and I do understand that many of my friends and families that are heading back to Israel now, today I had a phone call, one of our former teachers that are now back in living in Jerusalem. For sure, I denounce any anti-Semitism, I'm sorry, my tongue's twisted right now. I'm a little emotional about it, forgive me, but for sure. And I don't want any of my students, including yourself, to think that I feel any less about that. Terror is terror, and I agree with you. I agree with your statements, and of course, I do not want that. My tenure of my letter was to make sure my students knew that, and that we would be there for them as their families. And I'm thinking of the young man that Mr. Ifter was describing. I know him personally, are going through right now with our thoughts and prayers, but by no means was, and I will take your words constructively, but by no means do I mean that the terror and the act was at all not condemned. Of course, it should be condemned. There shouldn't be any terror at all. And I do understand that Hamas, as I stated, was separate than any other citizen. I wasn't speaking or referring to citizens of Palestine. I was talking about the terror group Hamas. So I hope that I'm a little clearer as I speak here. But by no means am I, I'm sorry that it was weak in terms of that, in terms of the feeling of it. But I spoke from how I speak and from my heart. And sometimes maybe that's not strong enough. But my personality sometimes, even if I feel something strong, maybe perhaps I don't express it in a way that you have understood. So let me say to you, by no means that I disagree in terms of what you said, in terms of the act, the terror act, which is now caused many of our families and our families in our community to have to worry about their loved ones in the region and so forth. And the place in which I was coming from was to be as helpful as I can in terms of setting school and structuring it in a way for the students to have a place to go without, like, because I know the structure of the day is to be in class and to just move on and do what you do, but I wasn't, by no means, I was trying to give access to students to deal with the terroristic act. And as I was going on, I did say, as things unfold, I wanted to make sure I had counseling and services for our Palestinian students. And I'm not muddling or mixing. I'm just saying in the region, I know there'll be loss as things unfold. And that's why I used the word unfold, because I knew it was separate. We were dealing with the terror on one end, and then as things unfolded, I wanted to make sure and cover my families and students that had family in that in the region as well. So, but I do not stand with terror or discrimination or racism or anything like that at all. In my own personal actions, in my beliefs, in my family structure, in my friendships, as a superintendent or as a principal. Everyone has a personality and speaks with a certain voice. And I'm nonetheless worried about what happens for my Jewish students and their families, as I would be for our Black students or any other students. I'm very worried about it. I do want to support. So I don't want you to think I don't want to support. But I was, when I was speaking, perhaps as I was speaking, I don't want it muddled to think that I didn't condemn terroristic acts, which I clearly understand. That was a terroristic act, and that many atrocities happened in Israel as a result. And I feel for many of my neighbors, families, friends, and students with family in the region. And so I don't want that underscored by the letter if it didn't feel like it was supposed to be so. Okay, go ahead, Larry.
Pardon me, my name is Larry Ryan. I am the Deputy Mayor of West Orange. But I'm really here today just as another fellow citizen, Jewish member of the community. So I really want to say that I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Moore, with Dr. Ifka on Friday, and we reviewed all the information, and I appreciate everything you're doing. I know, and I agree with you 100%. And I know that even the letter that you wrote, you reviewed it with a bunch of rabbis. And I know also I reviewed it also myself with a bunch of family members and community members throughout the community, who we know that your emphasis is about making sure that our children are supported, our children are cared for, and it's a safe environment. And we all know that. We appreciate that. I will say that, Mr. Twersky's item about the ICC, I am concerned about that, that I do think we should address that pretty immediately, because if we're not able to publicly do what they want to do, we should really address that issue. But I do support that, the letter you put out and the letter you supported us with, is appropriate. And I do appreciate what you've done. And I do, and as I volunteered, as when we met, is to volunteer to meet with you at any time. I'm on speed dial to you to be able to help at any time that we help for the Jewish community. I know you're there for the Jewish community. I know you support the Jewish community, and I do appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you for all your support. I do appreciate everything you're doing. But I would like you to address, and not tonight, but I would like you to address Mr. Torski's item about the ICC. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Warrington?
Yes, just wanted to read this statement that was sent out from the Department of Education, and it's from Angelica McMillan, who is our acting commissioner of education. So this is a statement regarding the recent events. It has come to the attention of the New Jersey Department of Education that there has been an increase in conflict arising in schools due to the tragic events taking place in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. The department is alarmed by reports indicating students are facing harassment at schools based on cultural or religious affiliation, including incidents involving racist and derogatory remarks, online bullying, and other harmful or threatening behaviors. Such incidents are deeply concerning and in direct conflict with the core principles of education, which aim to provide a safe and supportive environment for all students. It is our responsibility to ensure that every student, regardless of background or beliefs, is safe and secure and free from discrimination while pursuing their education. The department strongly encourages our educators and school communities to remind students and families of our collective responsibilities to reduce fear and anxiety during these difficult times, including sharing the department's resources to prevent harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and trauma-informed and healing-centered practices. Mindful of our state's diverse student body, it is imperative that proactive steps are taken to address incidents promptly. Every student deserves to learn and grow in an atmosphere that promotes respect, understanding, and inclusivity. The department also encourages education officials to ensure all students are aware of mental health or counseling services available to them through their district. The department is committed to supporting the education community to ensure the safety and well-being of all students and stands ready to provide any assistance that may be required to address concerns expeditiously. I appreciate your dedication to the students and families you serve, and I am confident that together we can maintain an environment where every child is valued and protected. Collectively, we will continue to foster a community of respect, empathy, and understanding within our schools. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And I will personally myself denounce terrorism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. And I recognize the impact that these geopolitical complex issues have on our students, as our Jewish families, as well as our Muslim families. The Islamophobia, the anti-Semitism, myself, I serve on the board with my colleague who is of, Jewish belief, and we oftentimes end up on the same side of most of our decisions. And so we feel the fear with you as well. I do want you to know that myself personally stand in solidarity with the Jewish community. I learned my Islam from a rabbi, so I do hold this religion and the differences. I understand, and we're there with you, scared as well. I personally have been told that maybe I should consider not covering and not wearing my hijab or my headscarf. I do go into communities where it's not like West Orange. I am familiar with dealing with people that are not friendly, that are hostile, simply because I choose to cover and choose to follow my own religion. And so I don't think that this is something that is easy to deal with. And I don't believe that this is something that's going to be handled immediately. But I do also want to encourage Mr. Moore to look into that incident with the ICC students, because I was not aware of that situation, and I don't want any of our students to be silenced. I would like for everyone to feel comfortable to speak out about what brings them discomfort and unhappiness, so that we can, as a community, heal together and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Huerta. Any other comments from the board?
Well, I just would say in agreement with what's been spoken by the deputy mayor and by Ms. Huerta, the incident regarding the ICC would ensure that student voice is not stifled in any way, not halted in any way, when students have a legitimate expression that they're granted that opportunity. And so if that incident did in fact occur, it should be looked into, because we do know we do want our schools to be a place where student voice is not restrained by systematic impediments, and where students feel that there is no parity, no fairness, and no opportunity to give legitimate expression, particularly when terrorism is involved, and the opportunity to denounce terrorism in a unambiguous and evinced way. Students should be granted that voice, as any student group is granted the voice. So if there is some measure of the disparity in terms of how students are given that opportunity, definitely should be looked at from a policy standpoint.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And thank you very much. Now, we don't do a second public comment. We'll be here if you want to talk to us after we close, but thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all that came to share those feelings and experiences. We always appreciate public comment, and especially in times like this. And I'll echo the comments of everyone up here that we do condemn terrorism. We do condemn the terrorist attack that took place in no uncertain terms. I know that when you say but, it erases everything that happened before but, so I will not say anything else and just say we condemn them. And there were a lot of words said, but we just want to end with that clear point that we hear you and we do feel the same. Thank you very much. Our next regular board meeting will be held at 6:30 p.m. on November 13th, 2023. This meeting will be held in the West Orange High School Library Media Center. We will not be going into executive session after the close of this meeting. There will be no further business discussed and no additional action will be taken. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Vice President Huerta. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ivker. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all for joining us tonight. Our meeting is now adjourned. We wish you a good night.